Hi, and welcome to the Women's March at CSUMB Hour here at Wave Street Studios in Monterey. Our theme today is sex and power, and we want to address some of the underlying issues, gender-related oppressive aspects of U.S. cultural and society, and also how this is experienced at the individual level as victims of sexual abuse and violence. To get into the thick of this, we have our guest with us that we're going to be talking to a little bit later, Claire Monteer, who is the Executive Director of the Monterey County Rape Crisis Center here in Monterey. But first, a little bit on a personal note. On November 9th last year, right after the election, I was really surprised about the rawness of my emotions, my emotional reaction to the election results. At one point, even my whole body was just shaking with sobbing and in a mini breakdown, and I was really actually surprised about that. I even got chastised for being upset and for voicing that what I saw as a normalization of misogyny at a really fundamental level. And true, by most standards and most measures, I'm a person of privilege, and I don't experience the oppression most people do. Still, maybe the fact that the misogyny and the sexual violence was part of the conversation of Trump's election is what led to many demographic groups joining together in the resistance and in what became the Women's March. The march is widely regarded as the largest demonstration in U.S. history. About 1% of the whole population took part, and it's maybe not surprising if we see the pervasiveness of sexual violence in this country. According to RAINN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, every 98 seconds an American is sexually assaulted. It makes for an average of 320,000 victims of rape and sexual assault each year in the U.S., and that's just counting victims over 12 years of age. 1 out of every 6 American women has been a victim of attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. It's 1 in 33 American men have been victims of attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. For transgender, queer, non-conforming college students, it's 1 in 5. For other groups, there are different rates for different groups. About 90% of rape victims are female. For younger groups, it's about a 20-80 split, so 20% of young rape victims are male, 20% of them, which is often not considered. Young women are 3 to 4 times more likely than women in general to experience sexual violence. And sexual violence has long-term effects. For the majority of victims, they have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms for months, if not years, after the event. And for many, the trauma is still there and can get triggered by surprising events such as the election or just even the campaign. When the so-called sex tapes with Trump came out in October last year, there was a woman named Kelly Oxford started a Twitter stream about sexual assault, experiencing sexual assault, and it had overwhelming response. People in the thousands came forward with their stories of the experience of sexual assault and how they felt re-traumatized by the political events, and really what we saw as many saw as the normalization of this culture of rape. Yes, so in the, I wanted to say a little bit more about that. Just that in general, after the election, also the mental health communities said they experienced more people coming forward with talking about feeling traumatized personally about the political events. And on this note, I'd like to introduce Claire Monteer, the Executive Director of the Rape and Crisis Center in Monterey. And we're going to get more into if you experienced any of these changes in recent times, and also the general experience of that people have in our community. But tell us first, please, about your agency and about how you came to lead it.
Okay. So the agency has been around since 1974, which is about the time that many crisis centers popped up throughout California. Today there are about 85 of us throughout the state, and our services really are restricted to Monterey County, and only in the last 10 years have they expanded to Salinas and South County. So it's grown in the last 10 years, and the services range from a variety of things, really. It was initially a crisis line that we started, and so we provide mental health counseling, crisis intervention 24 hours a day, professional counseling with licensed individuals as well. And then there's a range of prevention services that we offer throughout the schools in Monterey County. And we believe that we need to start this young, and that you are never too young to learn strategies for prevention and to have those sink into you to serve you throughout your life. So we focus pretty evenly on both those two aspects, both the intervention and the prevention. Both are very important.
Okay, great. And how did you come to lead the agency? What's your personal story?
So kind of accidentally.
Oh.
Yeah, I was hired as a temp 30 years ago, and it was the time when the previous director had left rather suddenly, and so the board of directors was in recruitment mode and looking for somebody permanent. And I knew the board president, and that person said to me, why don't you try this out for a little bit while we look? And I said, okay, but I don't know if I want to stay. So I'll help you out for a few months. And then I took the crisis line training, which is a fairly intensive 40-hour training that we still offer today to become a certified sexual assault counselor. And in the meantime, they were doing the recruitment thing, and at that point I realized, yes, this is where I want to be, and I applied for the position permanently and have been there ever since.
Great.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit more about that training. Is that available right now?
It is. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up middle of September.
Yeah.
And it's fairly intense, as I mentioned. It's Saturdays and Tuesday and Thursday evenings. So our website, if I can give a quick plug to people to go,
absolutely,
is www.mtryrapecrisis.org.
Okay.
And so if people go there, and by the way, it's a new site, we just launched it, you can find out information about the training and the sessions and what the schedule looks like and so forth.
MTRY?
Rapecrisis.org.
Rapecrisis.org.
Yeah.
Great. And it has the schedule for the training on there.
It does.
And is it, and it's 40 hours, you say?
It's actually 47.
47
so
hours.
It's grown a little bit, but during the course of the training, we cover everything that somebody would need to know to work on the crisis line, to respond to the hospital if someone's assaulted, to sit there with them through police interviews, DA's interviews, court, or even just, be there to listen. And so they learn about the criminal justice system, they learn about crisis intervention, they learn how to talk to people in crisis and how to calm people down. And of course, all the resources that we have available in Monterey County, which are thankfully a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like an intense training.
Yeah.
So how many months does it spread over? When
it's about 6 weeks.
About 6 weeks. Okay.
Yep. So mid-September, done by the end of October.
Okay.
And then we ask for a 6-month commitment because we've invested time and energy training people.
Yeah.
Most people stay for a couple of years and find it pretty rewarding, especially if you are doing one-on-one help with somebody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's what really got me hooked, was just being able to be there with someone and knowing that it made a difference.
Right. Is it for certain, when you do the volunteering then, is it, do you have to be available at all hours?
No, you sign up for different shifts, so it's totally at your convenience.
Yeah.
And then we have sort of a special sign up for what we call the emergency response, so that if somebody is assaulted within Monterey County and they make a police report within a window of a certain time, they can receive a forensic medical exam, which means they're taken to one of 2 hospitals in the county, and they get their medical needs taken care of course. But if they report to law enforcement, the evidence will be gathered, and it could be very crucial to actually making a case in court. And so it's super important, and it's a long exam, and so our advocates are there with somebody to just be there with them, make sure their needs are met. We're not part of law enforcement.
Yeah.
We don't have to ask questions. We're just there for them, and it makes a difference.
Do you also follow them after that? Like
We do,
yeah.
yeah. So, you know, if someone has a case that is continuing, and
Yeah.
of course, we serve people who choose not to report too.
Yeah.
But if the case goes on, we'll be there throughout the process.
Okay.
And, you know, just a quick story for me, I had one of my early cases was somebody who came in to the hospital, and I was on call, and I went out, and I met with this person, and felt really inadequate, left not knowing if I'd made any difference, you know. Did the follow-up calls for a few days and checked in on them and offered counseling and all those things. And then, you know, she clearly wasn't interested in anything at that time, so I said, okay, well, you have our number, you know where we are.
Yeah.
So 20 years go by, 20, and this person called and asked for me by name.
Wow.
And so she remembered my name. I'm not amazed at how, but, and I remember because it was my first case.
Yeah.
But she remembered and she said, I'm ready for counseling now. So you just never know what
yeah,
an impact
it's
you
giving me
have.
goosebumps actually.
Yeah.
Because that also shows how long
It
the
can
trauma
stay with you.
can
Exactly.
stay with you, and not actually being ready to
Right.
work on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm getting a little emotional.
Yeah.
That is
So,
intense.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really worthwhile type of community work people
It
can
is,
do.
yeah.
So if any of you out there are interested, MT
RY.
RY, it's the Monterey show. Yeah,
rapecrisis.org.
MTRapecrisis.org, and the training starts in September.
Yes, September 16th.
Do you have to do stuff before you start, or can you call the day before?
There's an application form,
Okay.
and you know, we do screen our volunteers.
Yes.
So they'll come in for an interview, and we'll explain in more detail what this is for,
Yeah.
you know, what you're getting into. And sometimes people don't make it through the training,
Yeah.
you know, because it's hard.
Yeah.
But anybody that does and who's interested in doing this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it is rewarding. It's worth it.
Yeah. Do you find that some of your survivors then become counselors?
Yes,
Yeah.
they do. So we ask that they've had some counseling help
Yes.
for themselves, because
Yes.
it's hard to, you know, kind of the analogy about the airplane mask. You got to take care of yourself before
Yeah.
you're ready to help someone.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure people are mentally healthy and ready.
Right.
But other than that,
Yeah.
it's good.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you just talked about how it is, you just recently have expanded down into Salinas and South County.
Right.
Is that, are there some, like what about undocumented population?
Yes.
Is that something we,
Yes.
that is like,
we totally help.
Discovering more?
Yes,
Or
and
people coming forward? Well, what
People
are
are
the
coming forward,
dynamics?
and our staff are bilingual, and so that's really important, particularly in the Salinas office. We really need to have that
Yeah.
available.
Yeah.
And we've certainly had undocumented people come in, and
Yeah.
they're nervous,
Yeah.
particularly in the current climate, because
Exactly.
you know, we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And so there's a certain amount of fear even to come into a community agency.
Right.
And because our name is Monterey County Rape Crisis Center, is that an arm of government? And it's
Right.
not.
Yes.
So, but people don't know that necessarily.
Right.
And so, you know, we chose the name because we want it to be reflective of the fact that we serve the county, but it is not an arm of government.
It's
We
not an
actually
arm of
don't receive any funding from Monterey County.
Ah.
So we are totally there to help people through this process and encourage them to get help. And we've had generally a commitment from local law enforcement agencies that they're primarily interested in going after the bad guys, not punishing a survivor of a crime for coming forward to talk
Yes.
about it.
Yes.
But still, there's the fear,
There is the fear.
and it's totally understandable.
Right. Because we have heard that more victims are not reporting crimes because they're
Right.
afraid of deportation. Have you felt an effect recently and less?
Well, I think because we offer a new-ish service now, which is child abuse treatment. And so this is a fairly new program we started 18 months ago, and it was to basically help the younger age group. Before we were seeing 12 and up. Now we can see 3, 4, 5 and up. But of course they have families.
Right.
And so families may or may not be Spanish speakers, and may or may not be documented, and so they come in with the kids, and then the big fear is, you know, if I leave my kid at school, and what happens to me if I'm taken by ICE or somebody, what's going to happen to my kid? We can't have them afraid of that, and so, you know, we'll address those issues with people and make sure they have safety plans in place for that.
Okay, great.
Because nobody needs that lack of peace of mind, if you
Right.
will. We all want to feel safe at our homes and feel comfortable sending our kids to school and so on.
Definitely. But that's good to hear that it is a safe space, even if
Right.
you're not documented.
Right.
You can go to the Rape Crisis Center. You mentioned something to me earlier about toxic masculinity. And I think that sounds really interesting and definitely very fundamental to many of the problems in this area.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so I think it's become a bit of a catchword, but what my understanding or my interpretation of it is that sort of an unhealthy form of masculinity. Because we see it around us in the media and in politics and everywhere else. But what it basically goes back to, that old sort of traditional masculine stand that, you know, men have to be tough, can't show emotion. Being anything less than some tough guy is turning them into women, making them feminine, taking away the good parts of being a man and, you know, being the responsible man. And, you know, there's plenty of good parts of masculinity, just as there are of femininity or anything else. But it's this thing that makes them so hardened and so unable to really be in touch with their own feelings. And it's actually bad for them too. You mentioned earlier that approximately 20% of rape survivors are men. Well,
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's a lot more than that. But studies have not shown that because they don't come forward. So if we are telling men that it's a sign of weakness to get help, then why would they get help?
Yeah.
And so mental health is so important, and it's not as if we don't all have brains and we don't all have emotions, you know, regardless of your gender or position, that if we're telling a certain segment of the population that it's weak to show those things and to not let them explore that side of themselves or show it and be a human being is really what it is.
Yeah.
So if that's not healthy, then how can we help men to be healthy men and still be men? And so one of the ways we do that is in our high school prevention clubs that I think I've mentioned to you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about those.
Yeah,
What it
so
is you do in the
we have
high schools.
high school clubs that are in 6 Monterey County high schools, and they're clubs for young women and for young men. And with the young women, we're talking about things like body image and personal strength and the ability to see oneself going on and doing anything that you want to do, fulfilling your full potential, basically, and not being a slave to things like how you appear physically or those things that are sometimes put on women, particularly, again, influences of the media, big. And then with the young men, it's more about rejecting some of those notions of the toxic masculinity, and that, you know, you can be a thoroughly decent man and not subscribe to those things, and you can be respectful for women. So it's about respect, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're talking to the students about those things and how to be allies for women in the feminist movement, if you will, while still maintaining their true identities and being their full human beings, part of themselves as well.
Yeah. And I bet also just gender identity issues come up with that training also.
Yes.
Which, yeah, on that note, we have also recent political upsets with the transgender ban in the military, which then I guess is not, it was just posturing. And I definitely see some of that political posturing as part of the toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
This idea of
that can they really serve kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And are they going to be detrimental to the rest of the crew? Well,
yeah.
Really? I mean,
absurd.
show me a study that says that they cannot be ready to serve. They've been doing it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but it also again plays into that, to the, well, I know, I like to pick on Trump, but like his denigration of women based on looks and their sexuality. Like that's all women are. That's, it is so infuriating and dangerous, actually. Yeah. What about the different college campuses in the county?
Right.
You have representatives there?
Yes. Well, we have particularly at CSUMB because it is the one school that has is not just a commuter campus. It's it's not a junior. There are dorms there. People stay there. They live there.
Yeah.
And so we have a contract with CSUMB for an on-campus, on-site advocate there. And she's actually a graduate of the MSW program from CSUMB.
Wonderful.
So she is there throughout the school year and on campus and can talk to people who want to come forward. It's very confidential, and so she can assist people who might be going through the Title IX process, for example, if they report to that, or through law enforcement, or even if they don't and it's about something that happened before they even came to the school. She's able to assist with things like academic accommodations if they need that. And so far, the professors have been really very willing to make those accommodations when it's come through the campus advocate. So that's really nice.
What's the scale of the, how many sexual assaults are there on?
There, you know, it's hard to say because if you look at the website for the CSUMB Police Department, it's small.
Yeah.
But again, those are only the numbers that are reported.
Right.
So, you know, I want to say our numbers of people who came forward was in the 70s range in the past year, which is not to say they were all raped on campus.
No.
Or they were all even raped. It might have been a small sexual harassment kind of issue with a fellow student. So, you know, we've been busy with just a range of different things.
Yeah. Well,
so, and she also does a lot of outreach on campus to let people know that she's there. And then we do touch base a little bit with the Title IX officers because every school has to have that.
Yeah.
From the community colleges and from MIS and other schools as well, which are also subject to Title IX.
Yeah. And so recently there has been talk about changing the policy on campus sexual assault reporting, and really to be to see it more from the assailant's perspective.
Yes.
Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, so one of the things that they're floating, or I'm not sure where it is in the process, is that it's very clear that victims and survivors have the right to an advocate to be present for them throughout the process, and nobody's questioned that right. So now there is a faction of folks who think that the defendant, the accused, should have, I'm not going to call it an advocate because it's not the same, but should have some sort of representative, not necessarily a legal representative, because we aren't legal representatives either, but could have a person that can sit in with them through all of the, you know, discussions and investigation processes and all of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're entitled to have somebody there. Nobody's saying that they cannot.
Right.
But should that person be required by somebody? I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's going to end up. And as long as it doesn't weaken the resources available to survivors, or put them off, which is the big fear. You know, if we take away a right, that's one thing. If we add a right to something else, that's different. A right to somebody else. You know, if you can add rights to people, I'm all about that. But I don't want to see it cost survivors anything.
Yeah. And another thing I heard about recently was a restorative justice approach to sexual assault. I think it's specifically on campuses that some colleges have taken on. Yeah,
so I mean, there's a big movement in restorative justice throughout the criminal justice system, and you know, there's a wonderful agency here in Monterey County that does some of that work. And they work mostly with misdemeanor type things and small things to bring the perpetrator and the victim together to have a one-on-one and say, you know, this is what happened when you did this. Yeah. And this is how it impacted me. And I think that can be useful.
Right.
Sexual assault cases, a little tougher.
Right. I heard that, I think that from some of the cases I heard was that there is the individual part of it where there's the one-on-one, and then some of them then take it more public and try to have a bigger impact by actually creating, like going public with their stories where both of them, both the assailant and the victim, actually have give public testimony about the nature of sexual assault.
We'll see where that goes. I mean, I think that it has to be entirely voluntary.
Yes, of course.
Now. And so, you know, a survivor could say, no, I'm not willing.
Yes.
And should be able to do so without any pressure or feeling, you know, I mean, the fear on that one is that the perpetrator says, well, I'm willing to talk.
Right.
You know, they aren't. What do they got to hide, you know?
No.
We don't want to go
that's
there.
Right. No, that's
so, I would hope it doesn't go in that direction. And that, you know, we still preserve the absolute confidentiality and rights of survivors that we've worked so hard to get.
Yeah. I asked you before just about college, the amount of cases of reportings. What about the county as a whole? What is this scope of the problem here in the county?
So it depends what you look at. So there are approximately 100 cases a year of people who come to law enforcement agencies. We have 17 jurisdictions. So about 100 come forward every year, and most of the cases are probably recent. I would say maybe 80% of them are something that happened within weeks.
Yeah.
And then there are always people who come forward after perhaps some time, and they want to just have it on the record that I, Jane Doe, was assaulted, and that was my perpetrator, and I want someone else to know about it, even if it doesn't go through the court system.
Yes.
So there are those cases too.
So what is so you go to the police, or you come to you? Or
well, they can go either, but if they want to go to police, we will support them in making that. And the police, for the most part, are pretty accommodating about taking a report like that.
And it can be 20 years old,
it could be old, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, there has been a long-standing statute of limitations in California that was 10 years, and now that's changed, or changing. I think the law's gone into place. So you can come forward typically at any time, and what we see, a lot of our clients are in fact survivors who were abused when they were children. And so they are realizing later in life the impact, like the woman I talked about.
Yeah.
That this has impacted them in ways that they hadn't realized, and then something might happen.
Right.
Where they put two and two together and realize, oh, that's why I've been afraid of relationships or whatever.
Yeah.
And how can I get help for this now?
Yeah.
And so we really honor that it's never too late for someone to get help. It's never too late to make change. It's never too late to make a report.
Yeah. Well, that's very important information for community to have. Yeah. I was not aware of that, so that's did you see any, so we talked a little bit, touched on it before, like with the election, that there was a public like kind of witness sharing about sexual assault experiences on Twitter and online and social media. Did you see it here? People coming, contacting you?
I think we had a number of phone calls where people would call and would be upset, particularly about some of the statements that were made throughout the campaign.
But not that it was triggering.
Not that, well, yes, that it was triggering.
But it was triggering their
own
past
issues.
experiences.
Yes. So it was that, and then a certain number of community members expressed outrage, and I think, you know, you saw the turnout at the CSUMB march. And
that's right.
Those are the ones that showed up. I
think.
That's
true.
So I think that it definitely ignited something.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for us to keep these conversations going and not let it go backwards. Yeah. Which is the fear.
Yes.
Yeah, for example, there is a lot of our funding is federal funding.
I was going to ask you about funding.
So excuse me one sec.
And another thing I also wanted to touch on is if it's like, because we call it was the Women's March, but it was for anybody. But whether it's detrimental to like gender non-conforming people when generally things like rape and rape crises are you know, couched in terms of the female victim and the male perpetrator, which as you say it's much more complex than that. Right. Do you think it's damaging that it, like we call it, you know, it's the Women's March and it's seen as a women's issue?
Well, damaging, no, because I think we want to be inclusive. Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that was the impetus for it. Yeah. So, you know, if it morphs into being called something else, we're not probably going to change the initial term. Right. You know, I'm hearing the term resistance now, and you know, things like that. Yeah. So I think that it's evolving, and I think we need to pay attention and absolutely be inclusive of anyone that's interested and wants to be involved in this and sees oppression and wants to take a stand against it. Yeah. So you see the victims that you see are mainly women, but far from everybody. So we see mostly women. I mean, the demographics are typically younger women, but that's not, again, all of it. And it's pretty much in line with national statistics that you had mentioned earlier. Yeah, among the younger, it's there are more males. And, and what about, so with the funding you get, mainly federal funding? Yes, so funding streams are basically a couple of different federal funding sources. One is from the Victims of Crime Act, which is a fund that is has come into play because of fines that criminals pay. So it's taxpayer money, but it's not directly taxpayer money. So there's a revenue stream that comes into that. And then the other one is from the Violence Against Women Act, which was championed by Joe Biden a number of years ago.
Oh.
And that is a very important act that is taxpayer funded and is reauthorized by Congress every 3 years. And so it's reauthorized right now through 2018, and we are sort of gearing up to be prepared to fight for its continuation.
Right.
And what it funds is primarily the prevention work that's being done.
Okay.
So the Victims of Crime Act money tends to be for victims, so
Yeah.
survivors. So it's intervention services, counseling, rehabilitation, and all of that. And there's a lot of money that goes into the police departments, district attorney's office to prosecute as well. And then the Victims of the Violence Against Women Act is more for prevention and training activities that are also very important.
So when it's coming up for reauthorization next year,
Yes.
is there something we can do? Should we write our Congress?
I think we
people?
all should, yes.
Yeah. Something like
So
that.
I'm sure that we'll be putting forward information out on, through our channels, through our website,
Yeah.
social media, and so on.
Right.
When the time comes, we will definitely be asking for support for that.
Because as we've seen, many of these initiatives are quietly being defunded without the big media hoopla that
Yes.
that the big stories are getting.
Yes.
Like Trump just defunded some very important teen pregnancy prevention programs,
Right.
and that
People
did
don't
not get
know.
much attention because there's so much drama.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, so we don't want it to get lost in the shuffle.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So good. Well, that's good to know
Yeah.
about that. That's coming up next
Yeah.
year. Let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have a small audience today, but yeah.
I would like to know when it comes to, do you have any instances of rape between like a marriage, a man and a woman, like if they're married, and,
Intimate
Is
relationship.
there such a thing as being raped by your husband first off, and do you have any cases of that? I guess that's what I want to say.
Yes and yes. So
Thank you for the
spousal rape is considered illegal in all 50 states. Some more recently have added that than others. For some, it's been around for a long time. And so it is treated in much the same way. And we definitely have seen people who have been in marriages or in long-term partnerships who have been assaulted by their partners. And we help them just the same way. So you don't see as much probably publicly about it because it's not quite as common. And the old historical women were the property of their husband kind of thing, I think that there are some folks that still probably think, well, can I report that? Isn't that part of my wifely duties? And the truth is that nobody should be forced to do anything, right? So it definitely is something that is okay to come forward about, even if you don't want to do so publicly. We absolutely can provide counseling for that. And so I understand why it's difficult. Particularly, it's just another form of domestic violence, really. And it's hard for people to break out of it.
So I have another question. Without going into details or anything, what would that look like, spousal rape? Because I know, is it the same as a date rape? Like you tell him no and he wants to do it anyways? Is that hard to prove? Like the circumstances surrounding that? Because I would think, I used to be married. There were times that I felt violated, but I wasn't quite sure.
So I think we see that inside marriages, inside partnerships, and actually with just ordinary people who wonder to themselves, that didn't feel right. Was that an assault? Was that a rape? And in some ways, I almost feel like it's a state of mind. Because if you feel violated, you were, and your standards of violation might be different than mine or someone else's. And so I think that it's really so individual. The eye of the law says, was a vagina penetrated by a penis? That's the legal requirement. And so, but the minute that a person says no, even if they are in the middle of the act, that supposedly can be prosecutable. Now, there's a big difference between what's prosecutable and what is actually prosecuted, because still there's the burden of proof in a criminal case.
Right.
And so, the district attorney has to be pretty sure that they convinced 12 people that yes, this happened. And it happened the way this person said it happened, and not the way that person said it happened, which is probably going to be a different story. So they're very hard to prosecute. So.
Have there been any successful?
There've been a few.
Yeah.
And typically they may have some other corroborating evidence that goes along with it. So it would not likely be an isolated incident. There might be a string of incidents. There might be some sort of other evidence that proves that something was not right. I can't imagine, a healthy, happy marriage would probably have those things happening too often. And so there might be domestic violence calls to the police that help bolster the case, for example. And that adds to proof that something's not right here.
But even, I think you're also getting at maybe that it happens a lot, like, right?
Yes. I would think that it happens more commonly than not.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. And because it's seen as, just like you were saying, it's part of the wifely duties.
Yeah, so they
to
think
put out.
of it as that. Yeah.
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 And it's a way, like our title being Sex and Power, like there is so much exertion of power through sex.
Right.
And even in the intimate relationships.
Yes.
I was also wondering about when it comes to, I know there's some type of law that a wife can't testify against her husband. So when it comes to that, does that come into play at all?
I don't think so. I think that because she is actually, if the wife comes forward, I mean, it can go both ways. We can, have a male who's being violated in some way too, but more commonly. But in that situation, the victim in a criminal case is actually a witness for the state, because it's the state versus John Doe. It's not Jane Doe versus John Doe.
Okay, right.
So because they're a witness to the case, that whole not testifying thing, I think, goes out the door, although I'm not a lawyer, so ask the DA that one, but I'm pretty sure you're safe. That wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a good question, though.
Yeah. And that is something that's a little tricky for survivors to understand, actually, because they do think that it's Jane Doe versus John Doe, you know, and that the DA is their attorney.
Yes.
And in fact, they're a witness to the case, and the DA's interest is in prosecuting the bad guy to protect the rest of us.
To protect the rest of us. Yeah. Because, right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm not sure how to get to, like, it's just everywhere, though.
Well, I think the media is a big part of it, too.
Yeah.
We haven't touched too much on that, but,
right.
We see it all around us with all kinds of media, from, movies to television to songs to all that stuff. And the messages are all, guys, be tough.
Right.
Girls, go along with it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're wearing the right makeup.
Exactly.
All those silly things that advertising to sell products still uses sexism, like, big time.
Big time, yeah.
Although I did see something recently that indicated that some advertisers were finding that was not the most successful form of selling their products.
The sexualization?
Yes, hallelujah, finally.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but also just in the advertising industry with people, the models, it's the females are typically sexualized heavily, and the males are representatives of that toxic masculinity, I think,
exactly,
that you were mentioning before. But that's interesting that they actually found out that it's not the most effective.
Yes. So, I mean, if it's, bottom line is money,
exactly.
Right? So if it's not going to sell your product, why would you do that?
Yes. And that actually comes back to us as the consumers, maybe.
It does partly, yes.
Educate ourselves and each other about not falling for, like not buying into it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but for young people today, particularly, we're raising a generation who are attached to their cell phones.
Yes.
Which, certainly my generation never had that.
Yeah.
And so this generation has grown up with technology.
Right.
And they're used to it, and they're attached and connected 24/7.
Right.
And advertisers are finding their ways into everything that's happening on their phones. And
yes.
so that, these messages are at them 24/7.
Yes.
So,
And one thing that really does, because I have a 19-year-old daughter, but they, and we actually talk about this a lot, that the social media, growing up with that, getting your identity with social media, it really, it intrinsically ties your self-identity to your body image.
Yes.
And how you present yourself visually.
Yes.
And for teenage girls especially, it's a lot of, you see it, it's a lot about, again, sexualization.
Yes.
And appealing to some idea of masculinity who will dominate you and exert power. Like the little, like a lot of the selfies with the No, but and so you address that when in your prevention programs with the high school.
Yes, so
and
we
do girls and boys differently.
We do.
Like.
You know, they come together and do events on campus.
Yeah.
So you know, and they work together. And you know, in these days, we're sort of looking at, well, and we've had some transgender students who have wanted to go into each club, and we've said yes, because why not?
Yes.
That's where we're heading. And so I think there's some value in having a safe space for both boys to talk about stuff that relates just to them, and for girls to talk about stuff that relates just to them, and what it's like to grow up as a girl in this day and age, and what it's like to grow up as a boy, and the pressures that are on boys now as well. Yeah. So yeah, we talk about that a lot in clubs, and you know, there's not really another place where they can discuss this in a healthy way with someone who's interested and has a little guidance for them. So I think it's an important piece of it. Right.
But do you see that? How long have you been doing the high school outreach?
About 6 years or so.
Have you, in that time, seen any change in like the body image relationship specifically? Because I really feel I see it a lot with the social media impact, that the visual representation of self is who you are, and it even changes who you are as how can I present myself.
Yeah. So you're asking for metrics, and you know, it's really hard to measure.
Just more of a sense of it.
Just my sense is that they're super interested in it.
Yeah.
And I think that what we're trying to do basically is open their eyes to look at it more critically. And just be thoughtful about doing these things, and when you are engaging, and you know what kind of messaging you yourself are putting out there, and not making yourself vulnerable to the internet trolls that are out there, you know, the stuff that goes down. And we've seen young women who've killed themselves over some of these things. I mean, how tragic is that? So if we can let them know and bring up that self-esteem piece, and know that, you know, just because you're maybe not the most popular kid in school, and maybe somebody took pictures of you doing something that was, you know, I don't know, but being more about, I'm a good person, I am deserving of respect, and needing that.
Another thing with the media, I was like, recently there have been, with the entertainment industry, like there have been men getting upset about the many female protagonists in Disney movies and other movies. Like, that's upsetting, because they feel that's bad for the little boys, because they don't, I know I may be ridiculing it a little bit, but because but that it seems like an attack on a certain power balance, I think, that men, you know, that boys are supposed to be the ones, and they feel that just because there's an inching towards some level of equality and equal representation, that's an attack on masculinity, which is really not what it's about.
I mean, well, and people say that about feminism. Are we all anti-men? No, we're not. No, that's not it. It's just that we want equal rights. And why shouldn't we? And why shouldn't transgender, and why shouldn't everybody be able to be respected and be treated equally in the workplace and in school and the army? All those things. So I don't think you have to take away stuff from one group in order to bring another group up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that sounds like really great work you're doing out in the community, both maybe especially with the young ones.
Well, we know that they are the most vulnerable to sexual abuse and assault, so that's why we focus so much on them.
Yeah. Are there other resources in the community that do work like that? You mentioned there are a lot of resources.
Yeah. Well, at least for girls, there's an initiative through Community Foundation in Monterey County called Girls Health in Girls' Hands. And it's a collaborative of 6 agencies, including ours and the YWCA and Girls Inc. and the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm forgetting one more, but we get together on an annual basis, and actually monthly, to reach out to the various groups that we're all touching. And we have this big summit that will be coming up in November. We've done 3 or 4 of them for girls, and it's all about bringing them together and realizing their strengths in their numbers, and grouping them, and self-esteem and body image and all those things. But it's a cool thing to make girls realize that you have a stake, and you are a powerful voice, and you know the strength in numbers, and when you come together, you could do stuff that you can't do by yourself. And I think we all need to know that, and that's partly what's come from what you all have been doing too.
And she grins silly.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So I may have missed it earlier when you guys were talking about the transgender community.
Yeah.
So what type of resources do they have for them, for the transgender youth, and then especially for those that's been like sexually assaulted? Because with them it's like maybe taunting, bullying, and things of that nature. Maybe not like a physical type of assault, but it's still talking about their sexuality and gender, and you know, telling them that they're not in their right minds and making them question who they are, and all those things. Next thing you know, they're trying to kill themselves, and you know, it goes a lot further than just, you know, but it all starts with that, with the bullying about their sexuality. So is there any type of resources available for them?
So I am sure that there are. I mean, absolutely, our crisis line is available for that, and our people are trained in it. And I think there are several different community resources, and I am somehow blanking on names, but I bet that they're there.
Well, we know in Santa Cruz County, there's the Diversity Center, which is a resource for all age groups. But yeah, I actually don't know in Monterey County either, if there are any. But
I'm not sure there's one particular entity that's devoting all of its time to that. I think there's a bunch of us who have a piece of it.
I know they have like the Rainbow Coalition, right?
That's right.
So,
yes.
So you have the Rainbow Coalition. And
yes.
So that's just one entity that I know of.
Yeah.
I wish that they had like a dozen, like they have for people that identify as male and female.
Right.
You know? So they have just as many for transgender that identifies as transgender.
Yeah. There's a group called the Rainbow Speakers too.
Rainbow Speakers.
That's
right.
probably maybe what you're thinking. So I know that they've done talks in high schools and things, and it's a panel of different identifying groups that go out and talk about their experiences and try to encourage and take away some of the sort of myth stuff that's still out there about it, and let them know that, you know, people have the rights to be who they want to be. And, you know, I think it's an interesting time that we're living in, because, you know, when I was younger, there was no discussions about any of this.
right.
And now it's so great that we're beginning to embrace it more, because they've always been there.
Right.
Yes.
You know, yes.
And why not recognize it and value it?
Yeah. Yeah. And make it, especially for the young ones, more
Yes.
Okay to actually be okay with yourself, be
Yes.
okay with who you are, and be able to talk about it.
Right.
And because I think that's, like you were saying, there's a lot of suicides and
Yeah.
really,
Yeah,
terrible
and
things
well,
like
and the
that.
bullying about homophobia that's gone on forever.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, finally, just a little on a little bit of a celebratory note, like last night we had the healthcare vote that did not pass because one of the things in that was going to be a temporary defunding of Planned Parenthood. And what do you have cooperation with Planned Parenthood, or do you see the role of Planned Parenthood in the community? Do you have experiences with that? Like,
We
just on
consider
that
them
note?
a sister agency,
Yes.
and we stand by them.
Yes.
And I think what a lot of people don't know is that no federal dollars go towards abortion.
Right.
And I just don't know why that's not common knowledge.
Right.
But, you know, it's not out there. And it's not that Planned Parenthood hasn't tried to put it out there.
Yeah.
But I know that they are very careful about the funding streams and keeping that separate, so it's not supposedly on the table for chopping. And yet, you know,
Yeah.
the politicians will do what they will do. So, yes, I'm thankful that it didn't pass. And,
Right.
you know, I think Planned Parenthood is so essential, and the services they offer are so much broader than just abortion.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
they need the support, and you know, thankfully they've gotten a lot, and we're lucky in California that it has the support of the California legislature, whereas some of those states where they've been reduced to maybe one clinic for thousands of miles is it's just wrong.
Yeah. And it's just another way of tying, again, sex with power, because it's almost a shaming of women for just being female.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's Planned Parenthood, it's about Planned Parenthood, about empowering women and giving women access
To services.
to services, reproductive health care, other health care, and support. And then the politicians who are trying to defund it are just making it all about abortion.
Yeah.
And what's it called? Evilifying. It's not like making women sound evil, and
Right.
and it's just well, it's definitely. So that was a good thing that did not pass last night.
Yes.
We're very happy about that. It was
Yes.
good news to wake up to.
Although speaking of the whole
yes.
sex and power thing, I mean,
Yes.
it was interesting to see that initially there were 3 female senators
Yes,
who were the ones standing up against it.
yes.
And they took some flack from their male colleagues
Very
about
much so.
this very thing. And it shouldn't be a gender issue.
It should not.
You'll not get health care, right? We all
Yes.
need health care.
Well, and the whole committee working on it, all white men. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So-
mean, it's so clear when you see it like that. And all these committees right now who are
Yes.
making very powerful decisions, they all look alike.
Well, but, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, to give him credit, McCain said something about, you know, why don't we do this, go back to how we used to work on things, which was together.
Yeah.
You know, stop the partisanship and let's work for the people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe something will change. We'll
Maybe
see.
something will change. But it is interesting that it was then the 2 female senators,
And,
and they got threatened. I heard Lisa Murkowski got threatened with physical punishment.
Yes, and there was some
She-
sexist stuff that
Yeah,
was thrown at them
Right,
too. So.
and was challenged to a duel
Yeah.
by one of the male senators. Just, really ridiculous stuff. It's like, wow, it's coming to the fore, isn't it? It feels like almost the whole climate with Trump and everything, it's crystallizing. It's getting really nasty sometimes, and maybe more clear. Maybe we're getting more clear about some of these issues because it is, it's so extreme. Some of the things that are said by the very powerful.
Well, hopefully there'll be a change now because this didn't go through,
Yeah.
and you know everyone can take a breather of some sort, and
Yes,
let's see if they don't work together and
Right.
do something better.
yeah, that would be good. Any last words from you, or otherwise we're gonna be signing off?
Okay, no, let's see what else. We just let me throw the crisis line number out there because
Yes.
I always
Oh,
like
yes,
to do that
please.
for anyone that
Yes.
might be interested in
should've
or needing to call.
write it on.
So it's 375-HELP.
375.
375-4357.
Okay.
And then our website where there's all kinds of information again,
Yes.
ntryrapecrisis.org.
And the training starts in September.
September
If you want to
16th.
do something and be an important community helper, volunteer, that's a great thing. Any last questions from the audience?
No, that's about it. Thank you for
Great.
coming and enlightening us about
Yes.
What's going on in Monterey County when
Yeah,
it
my
comes
pleasure.
to sex
Yes.
and power.
Yeah,
Okay.
really important stuff. Thank
All
you,
right,
Claire.
thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Bye.